Hello, Jedi. Be you a Jedi potential or someone who just has an interest in this? Be you a Pathworker or something else? We're going to look at what it means to be a Jedi. Now, as always, we're coming at this from a Jedi Pathworker point of view. I am going to try to restate that here and there, but we're using terminology that was established in the first video in this series. I'm doing a lot of these videos in the first day of recording because it keeps a certain consistency with message and information. So it makes it a lot easier to kind of get this terminology settled for both you and me, because I've been in the community, it's changed about 10,000 times now. So with that, we need to pull apart what it means to be a Jedi. And to do that, we have to look at the Code in its complete form, alongside the Oath, and the philosophy of the Code and how the Oath helps us understand that. Then we need to look into the areas of study and why I'm going to split those areas into 3 areas and what that means. And I'll compare that somewhat to Guardians, Mystics, and Healers to help you understand where everyone will pull from some of these arts and where some people will pull more from one, or may pull more from one mixing with another. So let's start with the Jedi Code complete. I'm going to list this as having a code of the self, a code of the Force, and a code of action. There's going to be a modification to the code of action, and the Oath is going to be modified. The code of action, I get to it, I'll tell you the modification and why. So let's start with the code of the self. Emotion yet peace, ignorance yet knowledge, passion yet serenity, chaos yet harmony, death yet the Force. You will never reach a completely emotionless state most of the time. You can drill in a core of complete control with enough training and enough meditation, which is covered in the areas of study, and that can kick in very terrible times, but there will still be underlying emotions subconsciously, and there will be drives there. And ideally, if you drill in that core, that will help you with bettering yourself as a Jedi. Now, this code of the self is what you are expected to be. You will note that the yet part is imparting a level of importance. If you're there going, I am half emotional and half at peace, so that's good enough, and now I'm going to emotionally do something without a betterment of self connecting to peace, that's not exactly where you need to go. The goal is to reach peace, recognizing emotion will be there. The goal is to reach knowledge, recognizing ignorance will be there. The goal is to reach serenity, recognizing that passion will be there. The goal is to reach harmony, recognizing chaos will be there. The goal is to connect to the Force, to recognize it as the infinite, the all. Recognizing that you still will deal with endings in your life that will feel final and feel complete, and that will have that aspect of death. I want to speak on the passion element. I have a good friend who's a Sith. They use passion as the word meaning drive, to be driven. You cannot do this path without being driven. If you are not driven, you are not on the path. However, our use of the word goes to the older form of it, which I believe is Greek, which means to suffer in a state of drive. So to be overwhelmed by your own self, to be unable to find clarity because of that drive. That's the real risk. That's when we say passion, that's what we mean. And that's why you seek serenity, to still have that drive, but to be serene, not overcome and not overwhelmed. Then we have the code of the Force. This will become a mantra as an exercise for you over time. I recommend it be, at least. It's what I use it for. And when you are connecting to the Force, using this mantra reminds you that the Force works in this way. And it goes as this. There is no emotion. There is peace. There is no ignorance. There is knowledge. There is no passion. There is serenity. There is no chaos. There is harmony. There is no death. There is the Force. When I learned this one, chaos didn't exist in it. Funny note for you. I go back that far. Chaos was not part of the original, And it was added so that this could match up with the previous code when it was created, so that it would have that balance and it would have a 5-line code. I personally prefer the 4-line one. However, over the years, I've come to recognize the value in this when I found myself in states of chaos brought on by the suffering of the passion itself. So, sometimes you will hit a point where you're saying there is no passion, there's serenity, and you know you're lying and you're trying to bring yourself back, and you're using self-conditioning techniques and meditation and mantra and things like that. When you're doing that, it's important to remember that even though you feel like you're in a state of chaos, there's also harmony within the rest of the greater world. And the Force itself is a state of harmony. This explains to us the Force itself doesn't have an emotional state. There's nothing hidden from it. It doesn't have passions. It doesn't have drives or suffering in that way directly. It doesn't have chaos. That's only when you're so close to a situation you can't see the harmony. And that death is an illusion. The Force goes on through all things in all ways. This is something that is very important to people who practice this more as a religion, less as Pathworkers. But as Pathworkers, it's very important to us too, because we are compelled to be exemplars of this in a religious state. So we have to kind of sometimes be a little bit more stern with the religious aspect than even those that are religionists, because it's not enough to have faith for us. We have to work it as a path. We have to improve ourselves on it. And that's fine. I'm not saying anything against the religionists. In fact, I've often found that the ones that have the greatest focus on that have been there as voices of reason in the worst times. So I find that there's a balance there. As it says, there's no chaos, there's harmony. We have the code of action. Now I'm modifying this slightly. I've removed the word galaxy twice, and I've replaced it once with the word all. And the reason I do this is because when we start thinking of the galaxy, then we start thinking of glowing toys and little jet fighters that may exist in a background picture on my wall, and that wouldn't fly in an atmosphere and would just fall out of the sky if they attempted to. Galaxy's a big word. And while we want to draw from this as a mythology, a mythos, what we don't want to do is be so immersed in it that we become just fans, role players, cosplayers. So, in removing galaxy from this code and replacing it, I am not meaning to shrink the impact of the Force. I would myself accuse myself of that if I didn't know my reasons. I would say, hey, is this because you're not trying to, give the importance of the vastness of the Force? No. And if you choose to keep the code in its original form, the code of action, because you want to remember the vastness of the Force, you may do so. You may replace galaxy with the all or the world as well. I simply remove it from the first part because it doesn't add to the statement and it's easier to read without it. So without further ado, the code of action. Jedi are the guardians of peace. Jedi use their powers to defend and to protect. Jedi respect all life in any form. Jedi serve others rather than ruling over them, for the good of all. Jedi seek to improve themselves through knowledge and training. So, let's look at this. Being a guardian of peace doesn't mean just allowing peace to exist when it's in a terrible state. It doesn't mean letting bad things happen. It means that you recognize that you are protecting the peace of self for others. You're making sure they can have peace in their hearts. You also have other duties that will sometimes compromise that to some degree. After all, if you are stepping in the way of someone who's hurting another, you're going to give one person peace and take it away from the other. That is the nature of the balance, the harmony. And all of the code must check itself against itself. Only in that way do all these parts of the code, and then using the oath as a final point of reference, work together. Jedi use their powers to defend and to protect. Now this is the variation. One variation says that it says never to attack. And to be fair, that makes Jedi into pure pacifists, which is nothing in the mythos points to that, in any of it. In fact, nothing points to Jedi being anything remotely like pacifists, maybe not even fully peaceful in the strictest sense of the word. I mean, laser chainsaws are the weapon of choice in the fiction. I personally, as a Pathwalker, feel we need to evolve beyond the concept of a killing weapon as our core symbol. I prefer the staff, personally. But I'm not going to push that as a Pathwalker on another Pathwalker. If you prefer the sword, I won't argue it with you at all. Not even a little. We may debate friendly to learn, but, that's its own value. When you are defending and protecting, sometimes you have to attack. If you don't have an understanding of martial arts, and I mean even a basic understanding of conflict resolution with your hands against someone else who is conflicting you with their hands, it may be self-defense training, it may be more advanced levels of self-defense training, or it may even be things like Qigong mixed with a more aggressive art form. If you don't have that, you really don't understand the nature of protecting and defending in a hostile situation. Truly hostile. Sometimes the only way to defend and protect is to go on the attack. You may think you can block every single punch, and you may be right from some people, but even the greatest Aiki masters I have met will eventually get hit, and they know that they have to strike first sometimes to follow into a person's punch and actually cause damage while themselves not taking it. That makes them the attacker in some people's eyes. And I understand that. I respect that to some degree, that view. But as a Jedi, you are defending yourself and others. You have to be able to protect in that way. That extends to the Force as well. There is no shield that will stop someone intent on hurting you. The Force is vast. Mysticism is real. Got bad news for you. Han Solo was right in one of those movies when he said it's real, all of it, or it's true, all of it. It is. To a degree. To a degree that people can hurt each other through these arts. And you must be able to defend, and you cannot shield forever. The best shield will always be broken. The best defense always shattered. You must be able to counterattack, to counter-strike, to remove the will of the other to strike. And in some instances, you may have to remove someone's life, either with your hands or with the Force. That should always be a very last option, and you should never be aiming with the will, intent, and purpose to do so. If it should happen, it should be that the escalation necessary to defend created the result, not you preemptively striking in that way. Because Jedi respect all life in any form, and that helps define the defend and protect. So if you look at this code, we start with Guardians of Peace. If you're guarding peace, which certainly you can't interject in things that aren't peaceful. You've got to go find some peace and guard it. But you have to defend and protect. So now you're defending and protecting the peace of other people. And yourself, to be fair. But you have to respect life in any form. The code actually informs upon itself. You should meditate on this code. If not daily, then weekly. Preferably daily, especially at the start. Eventually you'll hit a point where you've meditated enough that you've come to some realizations and you now come back to it only when you need to recenter yourself. Or when you need to center yourself in the Force. Jedi serve others rather than ruling over them for the good of all. So why the serve others? Because while you're defending and protecting and creating peace, respecting all life, it becomes very easy to respect life so much that you say, if under my power this would be safer, I can do that. This is a check against all the others to make sure that you don't run into a situation where you are overusing your abilities and your capabilities, be that martial or be that mystical. You will come to a time in your life eventually where you could stop a great altercation from happening with one strike to a pressure point. Humbling the person. Sounds like a good idea. Humble them. Give them such pain that they won't want to fight again. And yet, if you do that just over a word, you're ruling over them. You're not giving them a choice to make that action first. In some situations, if that word is, I'm going to hit you, yeah, you might be warranted. But if that word is just an aggressive statement, a cuss word, striking someone with that intent it'd be disrespectful to life, and it'd be attempting to rule over them. You also cannot decide what other people think. You can decide who you associate with, how you associate with them, what your ideals of right and wrong are. But you cannot rule someone else. Now, personally, when I train people, I require the highest level of commitment and dedication to an ideal of good, which is found within this. Lastly, Jedi seek to improve themselves through knowledge and training. Now, I want to hit on that as well as the rest of this. All of this requires the Jedi gain power. A lot of people say that the difference between the Jedi and the Sith in the fiction is that the Sith crave power where the Jedi crave to serve, and I disagree with that. Many people have focused only on the line of service. So much so that the realist community only focuses on that line in some ways. I would say that if you look at the code in a complete way, it's referencing itself. So you're serving instead of ruling over. But you have to improve yourself through knowledge and training. This is why I said in an earlier video, you might use the Force to better your life on a lesser scale. But you're not going to dominate someone's mind for long periods, even if you could, even if you can. You're not going to use it to rule over someone else. You're using it to improve you, your circumstances. That's a valuable thing. But all of this can be pulled together with the Oath. Now, I've modified the Oath. I've removed Luke Skywalker's name from it because if you ever choose to swear the Oath, you probably don't want to swear to Luke Skywalker, to be really fair. And I've changed the Brotherhood of Knights to just Jedi. The reason I do that is in the original Oath, it says, on the faith of the Brotherhood of Knights, or something of that nature. And when you do that, first of all, it's not a brotherhood. My sisters, who will watch this, it's not a brotherhood, obviously. It is a lot of people. And it is a faith as well. So with the modified form, it is this. I, your name here, do swear on my honor and on the faith of the Jedi to use the Force only for good, denying turning always from the dark side, to dedicate my life to the cause of freedom and justice. If I should fall, my apologies. It's if I should fail of this vow, my life shall be forfeit here and hereafter. I'm reading it. I don't have my glasses on. I don't want the glare to hit the screen. And I want to read it word verbatim. Now, I have a laser etched version of it right there. Cameras, sides, you know how it goes. And it has my name on it. I swore it. I swore it years ago now. Years ago. That's a thought. And I've held to it. Even when I tried to walk away from the path, I've managed to hold to it. So let's look at this oath in a little more detail and why it relates to the rest of this. So you're swearing on your honor, which means you have to have honor first to swear upon. So you're swearing on your dignity, your self-respect, who you are, and on the faith of the Jedi. That's the faith you have in the ideal, but also the faith of all those who've come before you, myself included, to use the Force only for good. So all of the rest of this, you have to have concepts of good. If you have removed good and evil from your language at this point, under some idea of homogenization or tolerance, and when I say tolerance in this respect, I mean tolerating people who are hurting other people. at that point, and I mean directly hurting other people before someone says, well, this hurts someone because blah, 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 and some bigotous viewpoint. No. If you are using these words, they're often used in other variations of walking a Jedi-related path, we'll say, and not focusing on a concept of good, you are effectively really just making the choices yourself. And you don't need a structure that's all laws and regulations. If you go through the fiction, you have more tenets for the Jedi than anything else, and the code is never mentioned in its perfect form, only the interpretation of it. So this is part of that interpretation. This is pulling a synthesis of most used parts to build that code, and as an idea that you meditate on. So you use the Force only for good, denying and turning always from the dark side. Now, what is the dark side? If it were just emotion, you couldn't have emotion yet peace. So it's not anger and it's not fear. The dark side is when, in this context, now the Sith use it differently. They use it as an essence of passion, and many Jedi use it only as an essence of peace. And honestly, to me, that seems a little short-sighted, because every reference we have to the dark side is about a bad person doing terrible things. You think they may mean evil? Turning always away from evil? The dark side is cruelty. The creation of suffering for suffering's sake. The act of cruelty for cruelty's sake. Or cruelty to an end that is personal and destructive. Look, you're going to have to step on people's toes in your life to advance at times. And I don't mean that in a bad way. You're competing for a job with someone else. You want the job. You could compete less well and guarantee they get it. You do that with every job, you'll guarantee you're homeless and poor by the end of a week. So, yeah, there's always variances to this, but we're talking about direct, dedicated actions, and that's why we reference back to Guardians. We have respect for life. It's why we gain power. So you have to gain power to have powers to defend and to protect. So that helps you with that. And then to dedicate my life to the cause of freedom and justice. We just defined good. Justice as a concept, not law itself. Law as a concept of justice. I'll quote a different piece of fiction for you. A different inspiration, and that is from Star Trek Deep Space Nine. There's a character of Odo who says at one point, laws change. And then he goes on and says some more about how different factions have different laws. And he says, but justice is always justice. Justice is a concept of leveled, respect and responsible counterbalance to actions and making things right when possible. If justice is just a fulfillment of vengeance under some sanction or idea, that's not very useful. And justice sometimes looks like that when someone is so terrible they have to be stopped then and there. But that's a rarity. You will go most likely your whole life as a Jedi and never encounter someone who you absolutely must stop. But if you should, you have to understand what justice is. So justice is actually explaining freedom. Someone who's imposing their will on others that they are a dominant, destructive force. They may be trying to decide what others can think or say. They may be trying to force other people to act or behave a certain way, or they may be treating them poorly, or even speaking about them behind their back poorly in a very savage way. That can arrest someone's freedom. Freedom and justice. These are the two pillars that you will build your understanding of the Force on. How important is it? If I should fail of this vow, my life shall be forfeit here and hereafter. Now, I'm not going to tell you to honor that in that way. Oaths should be honored with respect to the letter of the oath, but within also an understanding of the reality of the world. If an oath is a word verbatim to you, and you make it to someone else, you should keep it word verbatim. But this is an oath that is poetic in its very nature. And in that, your life being forfeit here and hereafter, to me that is forfeit in the form of dedication. Because you're going to fail at some point. And you're going to dedicate yourself, you're going to forfeit your life to the Force, to making it right, here and hereafter. That is the best way to take that vow. But it should be taken with the same intensity that a samurai would with their vow and the concept of honor and seppuku as the response for it. Don't delve into that with too much intensity at the start. You're going to make mistakes and fail frequently, especially at the very start. You're going to need 5 to 10 years before you get to where you're not making the big mistakes as much. Some people need more than that. But you're going to need more time after that to make sure you're not making other mistakes. So, to say, if I should fail of this vow and then treating that as a suicide type thing, I would not go there. I never recommend that to anyone. It's never healthy. And I don't mean that as a joke. I'm saying that mentality. But it should have the same importance to you as it would a samurai, so that you uphold it as much as you can for as long as you can. The philosophy of the code comes in intertwining all of these parts. And in meditating on all of them, the oath informs the rest of it. The oath is important. The oath was left out of the movies. It was originally written and it was filmed and they did not include it. And I don't believe they have the footage of Mark Hamill saying it anymore. But that oath informs the mind frames that came after all of it. This was the mind frame when the Jedi was foundationally built as a character concept in the fiction, which is our mythos for it. With that philosophy, in deep meditation and contemplation, you recognize that you will now have to become much better. I mean, you have to seek to improve yourself through knowledge and training. What knowledge? What training? Well, a lot of people like to leave it at that. But we have a mythos. We have a mythology, and the mythology is pretty precise. You're going to study the Force. And we usually break that down into sense, control, and alter. Now, some people put control first, sense, and alter. And I see it as this. Control comes first in control of the self. You learn to control your breathing. You learn to control your thoughts. You learn to relax yourself and reach out to feel the Force. But as an art form, control has more to do with being able to control yourself by using the Force as an augment. Maybe to clear your emotions, maybe to strengthen a muscle in an emergency, maybe to amplify your awareness when it's necessary. That's control. Sense is the first thing you're going to have to learn, in my estimation, because if you can't feel the Force, you won't be able to use it. So, you will have to first learn to feel the Force. My recommendation is art forms like Qigong. It's a good start. There's a lot of core stuff we see in that in both the Legends continuity as well as in some modern depictions. I believe in the movie Obi-Wan there was something that looked like a Tai Chi style set of movements in the temple. Almost as if though, even with how far things have become disconnected, they are still interconnected to this ideal. Now, alter is the last one. Alter is the ability to influence things outside of yourself. And most of the time, alter is only about using the Force to influence other people in a minor way or probabilities. Very few people have any skill in telekinesis. Many more pretend skill in pyrokinesis. And to be very frank, those things are weightlifting for more important uses of alter. When you have someone who's so belligerent, so angry, they're coming at you and you just go, I really don't want to fight with you right now. And you instill in your voice the essence of the Force, and they go, yeah, maybe now is not a good time. Maybe I'm not in the right head frame for this discussion. That's alter. You can reduce most altercations, irony, with alter. But you have to have control first. Control your own energies. Because if they're getting to you too, you're going to have that initial emotional reaction. That's going to happen no matter how hard you train. You use the Force, you cleanse that out. You get to a center point. You're going to want to drill a core inside of yourself with your meditation. I recommend for an early Jedi 1 hour of meditation a day. That seems extreme. I recommend also within the first year you take time to do a minimum of 10 to 12 hour meditation. Take and have some hot tea to sip if you don't mind. Stay in a meditative state, as you will have to use the restroom at some point. And in this, you will start drilling that core. When you do this meditation, I recommend you go looking inward for peace, and you use the code as a mantra. I don't know if my microphone's picking it up. My kitty cat is outside meowing. She got removed after the last video's start. So if you hear her in the background, then you'll get a very good lesson on how much I can ignore while I'm doing this. But in case this picks it up, I'm letting you know I'm not cruel to my cat, but I don't want her in here because she will hop on my altars. She will hop on my laser etcher, which I use for work. And I'm using my camera to guide my eyes, and that worked really poorly. She will use it to hop on that fan over there. Definitely. She likes attention. So if you hear her in the background, I'm not cruel to my cat. I'm simply letting you know. Now, the martial. The very first part of the martial that most people focus on is the defense. We all know martial arts is great for defending yourself. Actually, it's not. It's good at giving you foundational skills for defense, helping you think. It's good for finding you people that can help you with live sparring, which will help you in a hand-to-hand conflict, which is most of them, but most by a small margin. As a defense art, the martial arts is fair. It does something. It's great for your physical condition, so it's very useful for improving yourself, and it should be used with an eye towards that. But it's excellent for force connection because you can feel the force flow through these movements that have been designed with a parallel intent using an idea called chi, which is one of the root ancestors to our idea of what the force is. We understand the force to be much vaster than just the life force inside of ourselves. So this lets you gain a direct connection to that through those movements, through those understandings, but also the byplay of those understandings. There's a game that they do in Wing Chun and in different Kung Fu art forms called push hands, where you attempt to overwhelm an opponent. I'm doing this like this, and it's going to look awful, but you have hand against hand, and you're trying to maneuver to land a strike. A small, gentle, pat. And at higher levels, some people land a significantly harder pat, we'll say. But this is a good example of reading the force in someone else. So through these movements, through these actions, you gain an understanding of how the force moves in you. That's the microcosm of the force that's you. And therefore you understand how the force moves in the macrocosm. That also makes you better at defending yourself. That's where it starts to transcend. So through the force, these arts become much stronger. Because now you understand how the force is moving in the other person. Honestly, against a lead pipe, you need a melee weapon. I'm not going to lie. I prefer, as I've said before, and I'll say again, good old walking stick. It's a good symbol of peace. It is a lever when I need a lever. It's a support when I need a support. I can use it to help people. It's easy to replace if it's lost or damaged. As a defense only, that would be a step up. Against a knife, my odds have improved if I have that. Against a lead pipe, I'm still fairly good if I parry properly, and if I've taken the time for a deep introspection of the martial as it relates to that. martial arts used to be all about peace in our understanding of it. We had movies like Karate Kid and we focused on that. With the advent of mixed martial arts, it's now about brutalizing another person in the most vicious way possible under a set of rules that makes it hard to fight back efficiently. That's not what you're aiming for. You may use mixed martial arts as part of your art, but also incorporate the force through the martial. The martial also includes the healing arts, because Chinese medicine often mixes the two. Japanese medicine often mixes the two. So in learning this, you've also started learning the healing arts. So this is part with the mystical, with the force aspect for the Jedi Mystic. For the defense aspect, once a level of proficiency and understanding of it, both in its use, learning how to use it with other people, but also through the force to give you that awareness of what is coming with it. Now it's the guardian art, and it also is helpful in the healing arts. So this is a core skill, where the force isn't obvious for most people, because the mythology just plants it right there. A lot of people will argue the martial, and I understand why, despite the fact that we see Jedi non-stop using some form of martial practice, usually with a weapon that would be inefficient and so violent that it violates most of the rest of the tenets, but looks cool on screen, so it gets a pass for most people. They don't think about the irony of it. Yeah. The champion of peace. Yes, the champion of peace, and their laser chainsaw. I don't know. Not a fan. Even if that were the galaxy we lived in, that were the reality, if you will. Many Jedi chose to carry staves and other weapons, especially in early eras. So, before someone asks, and I know someone will at some point, what about guns? What about them? If you are in a place and a time where that is a weapon that is allowed and you choose to use it, there's nothing that says you cannot, but don't make it the whole of your training. It is an augment. Be good enough with it that you can use it under any circumstances, and then focus on everything else. Because ideally, you'll never need it, and you'll always be fighting someone else who's unarmed, and using it would be an escalation that you don't need to do. That would move from defense to offense. Realistically and ideally, most people will live that life. I've met many Jedi that are in security and law enforcement, things like that. They have to have a gun. Someone says, well, no Jedi can have guns. I can say that's fine. We're in the Pathworker discussions about working the path. And you can take your opinion, hold it dearly to your heart, and keep it there. Now, on the practical. Practical skill sets are more of a modern invention for the Jedi path. I am hesitant, but then I realize how many people know of these things that I take for granted under the, search for knowledge over ignorance. So because of that, I'm going to say, not only should you always be seeking to gain more knowledge and more understanding of the world, things you can do, things that make you a better person, better at helping people. Life-saving skills. You should try to keep up with the basic changes in what they recommend for CPR. CPR's changed. Now they're basically just saying keep pumping the chest and hope someone arrives fast enough, because getting that heart stimulated is the main thing. It used to be we did breaths in between and all the rest of this, and there are some situations where that is good, useful, and necessary, but that changes. Keep up with it. Make some evaluations yourself. Better yourself. YouTube has thousands of videos on this. Take the time and watch 1 or 2 or 3. Surely you can pull yourself away from the impractical media for 5.5 minutes. Maybe. We'll hope. And that's meant as a joke. We all get the information overload at this point. Fire awareness. Basic fire safety. Know a little bit about the difference between an oil fire, an electric fire, and a common wood fire. Or regular incendiary fire. Know what will and won't put things out. More destruction has been caused by a well-meaning person with a bucket of water and an oil fire than probably anything else on Earth in terms of fire safety. Learn that sand is going to work a lot better, or even salt, if you can bury a fire in salt. Learn basic things. This will take you all of about 20 minutes, and refresh yourself on it about once every year or two if you forgot. Basic medical knowledge. Apply pressure to a wound. It's not a lot that you need, but the more you learn, the more you can do. And you should always be seeking to raise that awareness. Take a few minutes. Take 10 minutes out of your month, 20 minutes out of your month. Change your viewing habits on the various platforms to look for this stuff. Basic awareness. That's these things like awareness exercises, awareness of law, awareness of what you can and can't do. More people have done more damage to a situation by rushing in when a police officer already had control of it, when they should have just sat on their hands. It doesn't take a lot of training. You can look for courses on it online. You can look it up on YouTube. I won't be getting into the practical overly much, but the practical also includes things like herbs that are good for things like sore throats, knowing what will help stem bleeding from an herbal perspective, knowing what various things you can offer to help someone with, knowing how allergies work and where allergens may be cross-contaminable, or where cross-contamination could occur in food preparation. The more you learn in these skills, the better off you are, and a lot of those, like the herbs, are combined with the force skills for the healers. So your healers are going to pick up a lot of these practical skills in those areas that maybe your guardian, your mystic won't. Your guardian will pick up some and should always be learning more. Eventually the line should blur a little bit. Eventually the guardian should know so much on healing arts, things like herbs and things like that, that people start to mistake them for a novice healer or a beginner healer. They should have as much knowledge on mysticism, the mystical arts, understanding that, the force itself, that people go, so you understand how this force works through these things like these rituals. Are you a mystic? Are you a novice mystic? And likewise, a healer or a mystic should know enough of the martial to understand how the movements integrate, that they would be mistaken as a novice guardian over time. Now, will you do this in a day? No. You may not even do it in a week. You certainly won't do it in a week. You might get the knowledge of some of it in a week, but you won't complete a deep understanding. How much should you train? When you should stop? My recommendation for people is that they should stop doing all of this training entirely after they die. But before that, they should continue as much as they're able. After death, in my estimation, that most people don't advance these arts too much further. So I recommend that up until that day, you continue training. The videos that are going to come after this are going to be very difficult because a lot of this is the same training over and over again for the force and for what I can express of the martial. And I'll hit on different points, basic defense techniques and understandings, both mystical and martial, why it's universally very similar, and things of that nature. But I want to remind you, you must have the heart of a Jedi to be one. You must be seeking knowledge. You must be open. You must be a guardian. You must be the place where others are safe. And honestly, I think that there's a lot of room in the word Jedi for people to not be guardians, not be mystics, not be knights, and not be pathwalkers. I've always approached this from a pathwalker point of view, or pathworker point of view. I like both terms and I interchange them. I pulled the term pathworker from the concept of pathworking, which is a mystical concept. Is this only going to be mysticism you see on this channel? Certainly not. But it will have some in every lesson, because if the force is not there in every aspect of what a Jedi is, then you're just a well-meaning individual who's using the name to describe themselves. And that's fine, but that's not a path worker. You've got to work with the path. How you do that? Train harder. Meditate longer. do more. You put the focus in, the path will give you the rewards. And don't worry about flashy titles and who thinks you're what. I'll tell you this. The greatest masters I've met, meaning teachers, but also with that refined skill, were never recognized. The greatest knights often never got knighted. Some of the best Jedi have come and passed. Some of them are no longer with us. So we should honor them, we should honor and respect them and keep our oath on the faith of the Jedi to use the Force only for good, denying turning always from the dark side, to dedicate our lives to the cause of freedom and justice. And if we should fail in this vow, our lives should be forfeit here and hereafter, in that it is forfeit to making right where we are wrong or making ourselves better so that we will not fail in the future. Don't take the oath right away. Give it 2 or 3 years. I gave it 18 almost, and I knew about it on year 3. This is a heavy burden you take on, this path. But it's a freeing one too, because you'll always know who you are, where you should go next, and what you need to do. May the Force guide and protect you, Jedi.